All right. I just have one item for discussion today, and then I'll open up the floor to any comments or questions, observations from the group. And that is, I just kind of wanted to resync on competitive. Um, More and more we're talking about storage provider profitability, longer term roadmap, value proposition, and really how do we win in the market? As we begin to shape this conversation, to me, my old school view of sales is value over next best alternative. And we keep seeing some of these classic players, whether it's storage or Glacier, Iron Mountain, Arweave, Wasabi, in our discussions. And I just wanted to just get everyone's, you don't need to have anything prepared, but what is your 1 to 2 line view on our value over next best alternative when it comes to some of these more competitive solutions, other competitive options in the marketplace? So, for example, there is one storage provider that I talked to in the U.S., and they were pursuing a major client opportunity with a notable client, which everyone would recognize, and they lost to storage at the end. And the reason they said they lost to storage was because storage provided an end-to-end solution that really resonated with the client above and beyond what the storage provider can offer. And like there was a lot of great, feature by feature, we stack up very strongly, but at the end of the day, it comes down to the client and what they value and what they're trying to solve for. So, I know these stories are out there. And I just wanted to kick off the conversation of what do you think these competitive options are doing very well? Is there a gap that we should be prioritizing to get on par with what one of these solutions is offering? Or just overall discussion about the competitive landscape. Any thoughts or observations would be appreciated. Stu, I'm going to come and pick on you first because I know you're plugged into a lot of these other options.
Yeah.
Just want to know if you had an initial thought that came to mind to kick us off here.
Yeah, certainly around storage. I run 3 nodes on storage. I've been running it for more than 3 years. It's, in a word, it's a hot mess. They continue to say, I'll quote from a post this morning, "We do not recommend to invest in anything with a purpose only for storage." In other words, don't buy any hard drives, don't buy any servers. They've reduced the amount of income you can make. People are complaining. People are leaving the network. And now they're spinning off into a commercial data center-based system that people believe is doomed to fail for a variety of reasons. So they really aren't a competitor if you look at their stats. They're really having problems, and the community's in absolute upheaval. So I just don't see that as being a true competitor. I think things like Wasabi and Amazon, at least when we're trying to sell commercial sales, those are true competitors in terms of people looking at it a dollars per tib basis, and then what's the value proposition. So I just don't see storage ever coming into any of those discussions.
So while I have you, you spent much time on Wasabi, and what do you see when you look at that offering?
No, I haven't really spent it. I just see it as kind of the low-cost leader. Them, Backblaze. So again, it depends on the purpose. We don't offer hot storage. We're not archiving solution. So it's not an apples to apples comparison. So
thank you for stepping into the fray first. Dinesh, go ahead.
Yeah, hey, it's probably my favorite topic, so I'm glad you asked. I would say the second Stu's comment on sort of storage versus Wasabi and the like. I think that the real competition is against people like the existing sort of large players, as well as the likes of Backblaze and Wasabi and so on. So we're clearly missing a trick, which is hot storage. But even if you focus on archive or long-term storage, there's a key gap, and I've said this a few times to a few people over the last few weeks, which is we don't have the enterprise tooling, right? So that user experience for enterprises, whether it's onboarding, on one side to to billing and invoice management, channel management. All of those things are either non-existent or really difficult to interact with. So, over the last several weeks, I've spoken to lots of different parties who are building or trying to build different pieces, but they're individual sort of blocks of a much larger solution. And I think I almost get the impression that we feel that by building an S3 interface, into AWS or, something compatible is going to solve everything. There's a lot more to it to be able to sell into sort of enterprises or even SMEs. So yeah, in summary, one, key competition, sort of existing players, Wasabi and, price points, hot storage is missing, and three, the tooling, which I think everybody knows is missing as well. Those would be my kind of key bullets.
Thank you for that. But before I move on to some other people, I just want to ask you one question. If you could prioritize one of the tooling gaps that you think is the highest priority for us, what would it be and why?
I think it's a difficult question to answer, because you're sort of almost saying, I want to buy a car, and should we do the wheels first, or the engine, or the doors, or the steering wheel, right? I think there needs to be that MVP, if you want to call it that, which includes all of those pieces that can take a customer through the whole process, depending on how you want to sell, right? So SPs selling directly or SPs selling through channels. There's lots of pieces missing, right? So whether it's the UI piece, being able to delete and move around files, just getting the data onto Filecoin, the onboarding piece. So there's lots of different components that need to be broken down, and somebody needs to build this, and that's the kind of the big question. It's like, well, who builds this? And I've only come across one party so far that seems to be doing on the outside a good job from what they've told us. Everybody else, when you dig into details, is only made it so far, only done certain things, and the rest is roadmap. And you can't really sell this properly at scale until we have that. Sorry, I didn't give you I didn't answer the question, but hopefully I gave you my point of view.
Can
Mara,
I ask a question in there, Porter?
Yeah, I was going to come to you next. Go ahead.
Okay. Just my question then would be, and perhaps we don't have the time to get into it entirely, but I would love to hear, what are the 3 things or 5 things that make up that MVP, Danny, or anyone else out there. Here's the thing. I hear lots and lots of people talking that retrievals need to be fixed. And I struggle with retrievals need to be fixed when, to the best of my understanding of what Filecoin is, it's about a lot of things, but not retrievals, right? Retrievals to me is not a big part of what Filecoin is. Maybe there's something else that needs to sit next to Filecoin that is retrievals, but immutability and verifiability to me is not a whole lot around retrievals. It's about keeping your storage exactly as it was when it was put on, right? In a decentralized manner. So I struggle a little bit with that and have had a lot of conversations, but I still remain interested and curious around understanding what that looks like for people out there when we say it's got to be part of, one of the things that's got to be fixed.
Comments on Mara's statement?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I agree with that, right? So retrievals are are going to be a requirement, but if you're selling, archive storage, do you really need retrievals to be? I mean, I think you can do retrievals today, right? But it's just the amount of time it takes to get retrieval, unless I'm mistaken. I think maybe a higher priority from what I understand is, how do you, in the words of a potential customer, how do you expose Filecoin to them, right? How do they get access to Filecoin? How can they use it easily without having to tinker with lots of different pieces? The pain that SPs go through today when they get data on board. Right? How do you abstract that or take that pain away?
Hey, Scott, I want to come back to your comment, which is the assumption that we have the same customers. Absolutely fair point. Wondering if you could elaborate, and just get everyone else up to speed with what you were thinking there. Scott. Do I not have, hold on, do I need to elevate you? No.
Oh, you may
Oh,
be on
yeah,
a different.
I got him. Now you're good.
Yeah. Okay.
Hey, there we go. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Excellent. Yeah, I guess yes, I believe I think Stu is right. Retrievals are table stakes. The point that I was making is that under what conditions, retrievals work. It's and I think we have that. But to Mara's point, I also don't think that we need to provide the same type of retrievals for, say, Wasabi. I mean, it literally says hot cloud storage right there. That's what they're providing. So if we're going to, chasing people, chasing Wasabi ambulances isn't really going to work. So you just want to think about SLA and under what conditions people need the data. And then you kind of work backwards from those unique value props, and you may end up with different customers. And so I think it's a product market fit question at the end of the day.
To that end, can I just throw something out there? And I'm not, it's the concept, it's not the specific words, because I don't think the words are the right ones, but just for right now, right here, we have Filecoin storage service, archive service. And let's say you go and you put a PIB on, and the baseline tier of storage is you put it on, and you can, if you put a PIB on, you can take a PIB off over the life of the contract. So it's 18 months, let's say. You put a PIB on, you can retrieve up to a PIB off, and maybe you put some time, how many requests you can make or whatever, 1 per month over the life, whatever. Those are the details. And that is just the straight fee, right? Let's call it $2 or $5. I don't care what the number is. We'll call it 1 penny, right? 1 penny for that. Then you have a higher level of service, which is a warm retrieval, which is you get your data back in, let's say, 1 or 3 business days. And then you have a third tier of service, which is you can make a retrieval of your data within hours. Your time to your first byte is, oh gosh, it could be minutes, right? But you get what I'm trying to say is there's 3 different levels here, and you charge differently for these 3 different levels. In my mind, something like that makes sense from a pricing and packaging standpoint. How does that resonate with people? Am I not seeing the full picture? Poke holes in it for me.
Well, there's a couple flies in that ointment. One,
Right.
of course, is cost, right? So it isn't a question of can you do a retrieval. One per month would certainly never meet your goal of a PIB over 18 months. So the expectation and the consideration there is 2 things. It's scale. how much data can you get back and over what period of time, which is a limiting factor depending upon, you know, the customer and the profile. It's very, very different if you're talking about, let's say, protection against ransomware, where you need to quickly retrieve, return a bunch of data, or even AI that's coming up, right? If you've got a bunch of data and you need access to it, they're not going to wait forever, right, to be able to do the compute over that AI. So, you know, you're going down one of a couple roads, right? You either have a duplicate set of data stored in what we call unsealed, right, or fast retrieval, which doubles your storage cost. So again, it changes your model in terms of cost, you know, or you've got to come up with another way to do it. Now, I think many of us, when we look at the problems in terms of why we say retrievals don't work, is they don't work at scale. They don't work through the intended unsealing mechanism, right, which would allow you to quickly unseal many sectors concurrently and get you reasonable performance, you know, getting time to first byte within a matter of hours, right, rather than days. So, you know, it's not as simple as, do retrievals work, yes or no? Well, yeah, you can make them work, but, you know, either because you're spending a lot of extra money, or because you can only do one at a time, or you're counting on a system like Saturn, right, to do some caching, you know, and all of those are, you know, suffer from some major issues.
Well, I think that's exactly what I was trying to get at, Stu, is that there's different prices for each of these, right? The no egress fee at the bottom is $1. The other one is $1.50. The next tier is $1.50, or it doesn't matter what it's $1 and more. And the other one is $1 and more, right? So you're taking your costs into consideration when you're pricing it,
right?
Which
However,
ultimately is what helps build profitability.
Right. However, the mechanisms really aren't there, right? I mean, you know, in terms of managing retrievals, pricing retrievals, all of that is still wanting today. There are ways to manually do some of this stuff, but you know, they're very, very primitive.
Sounds like good opportunity for contribution in the community.
Lex, go ahead.
Yeah, so there's one more underlying assumption which I think is a little bit faulty, especially when it comes to enterprise storage cases. Let's say I come to Stuart as a customer and tell him, hey, I have 100 TB of data. Can you store it? Stu goes, yeah, why not? So now I get with the lowest costing tier here, right? And I have, let's say, first byte in 3 days. I'm okay with it, right? Something goes wrong, and now I ask to, hey, can you give me back the 100 TB in 3 days? And that puts a very huge, complicated system. A machine has to kick up and unseal hundreds of sectors, right? And that's simply just not scalable. So we need to think of, like, when it comes to enterprise, we need to always keep scale in our mind, right? That's always going to be a problem. So it's not just about, you know, not pricing it differently. It's also about improving technical stack that we can actually serve those retrievals in the time promised.
Absolutely. And that's part of your pricing philosophy, right? Is you gotta play this out in your P&L and your business case over time, which is, okay, if I'm going to offer said service and I grow to X point and X percentage of the people ask for retrievals at any given point, you know, I have to have the scale or the cost basis, the infrastructure and the tools and the technology to be able to fulfill that. So all of this grows together in scale. It is not simply a pricing exercise. It's a business capacity management exercise, which ultimately can help lead to profitability. I totally agree with you, and that was a great point. man, thank you.
We got some momentum. Other observations? Any topics we haven't discussed yet?
I've got a slightly tangential question here on what's happening in China with the investigation into miners there. I don't know if any of that has had an effect on Filecoin price, but I'm just wondering if that has any exposure to Filecoin Foundation or Protocol Labs in any way.
This is Stefan. I mean, in the last 2 years, we have seen similar investigations in China. So it's not the first time we have seen this happen. We have seen Chinese SPs being arrested, moved out of the country. So, and some of them have successfully moved out of the country, have successfully expanded their business. Look at Origin Storage, look at Greater Heat, even 1475, RR Mine. Some of them have rebranded themselves, opened offices in the US. I mean, what I'm trying to say is that I'm not aware of any, we are not, as far as I know, affected at all. Like, we're not engaged in those allegations because, you know, we don't sell anything. We're not engaged with any promotional activities. We always support the network. So from that perspective, nothing that I'm aware of. And on the other hand, like, again, it's unfortunate. Obviously, we don't condone these kind of behaviors, but that's part of the ecosystem. You know, it's permissionless. Anyone can run the stack, and, you know, how they raise money or how they approach it is sort of out of our control. And so we take it, you know, take some distance there. But in general, like, yeah, we've seen this before. And my point is, things have sort of gone away, meaning these have been resolved within the country and in different ways. Of course, we know that some people have been arrested and so on, but again, so we don't have any association with that. I think it's important. Thank you for bringing it up. Regarding the price, yeah, I don't actually know what the impact there was, but obviously it's been a tough week last week. So definitely not for the whole, I think for the whole crypto market, but we're hoping that will work out, of course.
Yeah, and this is Clara coming from the foundation side. Same thing. We definitely are trying to. This is why we're hiring. You know, trying to look for an APAC community manager, just making sure that we have a better sense of the voices on the ground ahead of these things happening. But unfortunately, this was, you know, facilitated by obviously an SP that is independent of anything we have been involved in, and so we're trying to support the community there while also making sure that, you know, like we can not get entangled in what's happening on the ground, right? So it's definitely tough, but we definitely want to make sure we can have a heads up, because we also found out about that for the first time when the news came out.
Dinesh, I'll take your silence as that's an acceptable answer for you.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, yes, that
All right.
clarifies. I appreciate it, Clara, Stefan.
Awesome. Angelo, before we kind of move on from competitive, I actually want to just tap you, get your thoughts and kind of how you see the competitive landscape out there at the moment.
The reporter, you reached out to me?
I did. I'm calling on you to just kind of bring it back to competitive for us, and just if you have either detailed observations or macro observations on how you see the competitive landscape at the moment.
Right now, let me think about that. I heard Stu about storage. Had a good point there. If you look at, like, from the front end, storage looks like a really good solution, but I've heard about the back end issues as well. did some research into that. When you look at like the other players in there, like I think Wasabi is a really good one to compare to if you want to move forward. I do think like with the new tooling coming out and the integrations that we're working on, being more competitive is definitely doable. But looking in some, let me put it this way, Porter, maybe can we schedule some time next week, because I wanted to bring that up on the end to look at some pricing models exactly when it comes to like the competitive edge of that. I don't know if that's possible, because I can pull up some models and then I want to like pull that through the community and see what they think about it.
I think that's a perfect follow-on to this conversation, so absolutely.
Yeah, let's do that. That's maybe easier, than I can prep some stuff. But maybe the conversation would be way easier that way.
Excellent.
Let's do that. Yeah.
Now everyone's got an incentive to tune in next week to see what Angelo's cost breakdown across protocols, across
There you go.
competitive. All right. Other questions, other observations that people like to share? Open floor on competitive. Well, if you don't have anything that you'd like to share today, Mara and I are always willing to listen to your observations via Slack. I think aggregating all this insight is always a value-added activity. We'll keep coming back to competitive more often just to make sure we're tracking in the right direction, we're prioritizing the right gaps, and we're making progress. I always love the saying, which is if you're going to be a competitive player, you need to offer a 3x advantage on a frontal, a 1-to-1 solution by solution comparison, or you need to be flanking the competition, offering something very unique and differentiated than what the traditional providers all offer. So I always keep that in mind when talking about competitive. I could see us taking on the 3x advantage approach, and I can also see us taking on the flanking approach. And maybe it's ultimately comes down to a mixture of both. But looking forward to next week and Angelo's cost breakdown. So be sure to tune in for that as well.